I'm really all in on Bitcoin, financially and spiritually. I try to have as much of my savings in Bitcoin as possible. I keep some cash on the side so that I can live day to day. Short term, I have a very confident and optimistic view of its purchasing power in the long term. Bitcoin can't lose in this thing. Bitcoin will win whichever direction this thing goes in, giving me the freedom to explore who I am and to live up to who I am and not have to be a wage earner from 9 to 5.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Toma Strolight to the podcast. Toma has been in the Bitcoin space since 2013. He wrote the short film, Bitcoin is Generational Wealth, along with the books Why Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto and His Bitcoin Invention. He was editor-in-chief at swan.com. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Toma.
Hi. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I have been listening to quite a lot of your podcasts and hearing you on X Spaces, and I really love your spiritual approach and philosophical approach. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to Bitcoin 12 years ago.
Okay. I'm old, so there's a fair bit to say. I don't know where exactly to begin. I mean, I'm a business school graduate and was a businessman for most of my career. I graduated in the mid 90s, 95, just when the internet was happening. I got my first job before the internet was really a thing, although I'd used the internet and ended up working at a large newspaper company, the Toronto Star, which was the largest newspaper in Canada at the time. Helping them launch their website. That was the first really big job that I had. And I ended up staying there for 16 years, ultimately running their digital division and watching how the digitization and disruption of that industry, the newspaper industry, essentially destroyed it and replaced it with highly fragmented digital media. I did some private equity, ran a couple of smaller companies, was a CTO, chief technology officer for an internet company. And while I was doing the private equity side of things around 2013, that's when I first heard about Bitcoin. I used to have this joke when people would come and pitch me their business plans and say, show me their PowerPoint for their not yet to launch business. And they would say, what do you think my business is worth? And I would say somewhere between zero and all the money in the world. Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't find that funny. But I would. And when I first saw Bitcoin, I said, oh my God, this thing is actually going to be either zero or all the money in the world, having seen what I had seen. And so I was really drawn into it by the nature of the fact that nobody knew who created it. It ran on its own. It used bizarre technologies, peer-to-peer networking and cryptography to pull everything together, and really evoked my curiosity and my interest both in money and in the internet and in digital technologies and disruption. And it was like this thing's going to disrupt money and government rather than media and telecommunications, which is where I came from. And so that was my entry into the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
So did you get Bitcoin right away? It just made sense to you, and did you go on an altcoin journey?
I knew that there was something magical and special there, but Bitcoin is not something you get in, I was looking for material to study and understand it. I knew I didn't understand what a digital signature was. I didn't understand what a hash function was. I didn't understand how the blockchain worked. And it took years to really polish off the edges. There was a lot of learning at the beginning. But it was still with big, vast holes. I didn't understand how a Bitcoin transaction worked or what was in it or what was inside. And it was hard to find material to really explain it other than digging through news groups and forums. And there weren't textbooks and there weren't courses on Bitcoin really at the time. And it wasn't until Princeton actually released a video course on Coursera that there was actually something formal that one could spend hours studying and educate oneself on. I think that was probably late 2013 or early 2014 that came out. And that was really helpful. But there was just a lot of talking to other people who were just equally curious or slightly more experienced. That was what the early learning process was about. But I'd say, they say nobody ever fully understands Bitcoin. It is a dynamic system that's developing and growing and expanding and reaching out into different ways. So you can understand the technology of it, but even if you do, you don't really understand the whole of it because it's a complex system that is chaotic and interacts with the chaos of the whole of humanity.
Yeah, so speaking of that chaos, you've been through quite a few bull markets and bear markets, as we would call them.
Sure.
And do you think that we still are going to have a 4-year Bitcoin cycle? And do you have an easier time handling all the different things going on at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to make forecasts about the price, especially in the short term. And even 4 years for me is the short term. Like when people are interested in Bitcoin and they want to make an investment of their money in it, I say, appreciate that you're holding on for at least 5 years, right? And that smooths everything out. You generally are going to be in a good position if you're in for at least 5 years. But I'd like to say, you'll probably be in it for life.
Yeah, so the short term,
Yeah,
you're five
I'm not
year.
a big, I'm not one to speculate. I don't have models for predicting the price of Bitcoin short term. I have a very confident and optimistic view of its purchasing power in the long term. More and more people are going to realize and recognize what it is, and they're going to invest their capital in it, and so it's going to grow in value significantly.
Do
That's
you
all I have
think?
to say about that. As
Yeah.
far as you also asked about the volatility and the difficulty, and maybe we're implying also about crises that are happening in there. I think with respect to all of that, yeah, the longer you're around, the more accustomed you get to the fact that Bitcoin is not a smooth ride. It's not a smooth road. It's a roller coaster. It's terrifying at times. You're going over the edge of the waterfall, or you feel like you're about to crash. There's a schism in the community. There's a technical question that people can't answer. But Bitcoin survives, and because it is so decentralized and anti-fragile, that it really is exploring all the possible paths simultaneously. So even if a part of it goes over a cliff, the rest of, like, the whole of it actually continues not to go over a cliff. Or if going over the cliff turns out to be a good thing, everyone follows it over the cliff to its success. So that's like the fact that it isn't one thing in one center led by one group making one decision at a time is what gives it the survivability. And everything that was really programmed into Bitcoin at its creation prioritized survivability above all else. If energy is added to it, it adapts. If energy is withdrawn from it, it adapts. If some of the nodes go down in some geography, it adapts. If all of the nodes go down in a particular country because of government intervention, it adapts because it stays alive everywhere else. If someone makes a fork of it that's worse, it gets ignored. If someone makes a fork of it that's better, it gets followed. So in every instance, what survives is Bitcoin, and it is exploring all of these things. It's never an all or nothing thing for Bitcoin.
So your conviction, obviously, over time has increased. You've seen many of these wars, the Knots versus Core at the moment going on. And
Yeah.
what would you say to new people just getting in?
Yeah, I'd say if you study the history of Bitcoin, you'll see that this is by no means the scariest thing that's ever happened in Bitcoin. It barely registers for people who are really involved in it. It may feel intense and that they're fighting for something really important, and that it's important that they win rather than they lose. But Bitcoin can't lose in this thing. Like, Bitcoin will win whichever direction this thing goes in. It'll look a little bit different if it goes one way versus another, but it'll continue to be strong and survive. And if at some point Bitcoin does split into two and we ever see two succeeding versions of Bitcoin, then everyone who didn't do anything will have both versions. So, but I don't think that there's a split even remotely likely to happen with respect to the current core versus knots, which is unlike what the block size war was all about, where we did have chain split after chain split after chain split that actually became an airdrop for people who knew what was going on.
Yeah. And before we started, you mentioned that you wrote a paper on Satoshi Nakamoto and you wrote a book on Satoshi Nakamoto.
I've, I've written a fair
Obviously,
bit.
so you obviously quite well versed on a lot of what he or they have accomplished. What is your main message about this incredible individual or
Right.
entity that created something so wonderful that has the potential to change the world?
Well, I mean, in large part, that's the message. Like, I think we've been given such a blessing. We have someone who solved a technical problem that the people who studied the problem, this double spend problem, or the Byzantine generals problem, as it's known, the people who studied the problem had proven that it could not be solved. There's no solution to the problem. And then out of nowhere, in the middle of a financial crisis, someone shows up, a mystery man, right, wearing a mask. You never see his real face. You never hear his real voice. You never know his real name, like a superhero in the comic books. And he does the impossible thing. He has a superpower. He somehow overcomes all of the physical objections, all of the mathematical objections to solving the Byzantine generals problem. And he has a solution that works in practice for it. And it forms a new type of money, a money that's unstoppable, unseizable, uninflatable. It too has superpowers. So he's got like this intellectual superpower to create something that has physical superpowers. And he, like a superhero, doesn't do it for the money. He's not asking for money. He doesn't do it for the fame. He keeps his identity secret forever, eventually disappearing. He doesn't do it for power. He's not around wielding monetary power like a central banker. He does it for some other reason, to prove that it can be done, to stand up and face the central bankers and politicians of the world who are stealing money from everybody in the world through inflation. And he wins. And he rides off into the sunset. So it's a really incredible story. And in the essay that I wrote called The Legendary Treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto, I speak about how studying this origin story of Bitcoin actually leads to a spiritual awakening for a lot of people, because it flies in the face of all of the cynical background that we are told is true in the world. We're told if experts say something can't be done, then it can't be done. We're told that if something does get done as significant, it's done for money, power, or fame. We're told that corporations will take over everything, or government will involve themselves in everything. And every one of those things that we are told, that I just cited, is proven false by this one story. This one story proves that the government can't necessarily take over everything, that corporations don't take over everything, that people don't have to do something for money, power, or fame, that experts might be wrong in what they say can't be done, even if they've proven that it can't be done. So it's a tremendous story of hope, and it shatters all the cynicism that we live with the world around us. And so Bitcoiners who study it can't help but see that all those things are lies. All those things are not true. And what is true is that all of these things that Satoshi accomplished are in fact possible. And so that leads to a tremendous spiritual uplifting. It shatters old beliefs and fills the vacuum with this hopeful story, and something to work on that's hopeful, which is the Bitcoin mission, if that's what you choose to work on.
Yeah. In your X tagline, you mentioned humility. Is that something that you got from studying Bitcoin?
Yeah,
And
I think, and that's another one of these spiritual awakening elements in Bitcoin. I think in the corporate world, for example, make a name for yourself, rise up the corporate ladder, get as rich as you possibly can, and that puts you in a battle with others as you struggle to climb to the top of the hierarchical pyramid, to take credit for things that you have done and maybe others have done, to not let others take credit for what you have done, and instead, in Bitcoin, there is this rejection of ego. There's this rejection of, look what I did here, right? It is a collective mission that helps you individually, but its peer-to-peer nature, its decentralized nature, its leaderless nature means that you can't rise. There's only one rank in Bitcoin, and that's peer. It's a peer-to-peer system. There's no super peer, higher peer, president, CEO, chairman. None of those things exist. So the humility that is required to say, I'm just a peer in this network. I do what I can as myself for it, not for the sake of rising above somebody else in the network to some higher rank and to give orders to somebody else, but to be myself. And I think that's the great liberation in Bitcoin as well. If you accept the humility of you're a peer rather than you're superior or inferior to somebody else, then you get to be who you are. You get to be yourself. And that's a really releasing and freeing thing. You're not trying to be the person who you need to be the CEO of the company. You're trying to be yourself. And that's that's an incredible gift that you don't get if you participate in the corporate world.
It certainly is. And that does make the world a better place because I've heard many Bitcoiners say that, yes, while I want to be financially free and free in other ways, I also want the rest of the world too. It's not just about me anymore. And, I spoke to somebody yesterday from Zambia who is not only saving in Bitcoin, spending in Bitcoin every day to help the merchants in Zambia. There are people all over the world who are doing these wonderful things, not just for themselves. And is that what your life's work is?
Yeah, I think you get for one, you get the victory of being able to be yourself. So there's a selfish gain here, which isn't a monetary selfish gain, and it doesn't come at the expense of anybody else, right?
Yeah.
It's for your own self, for your own sake, not at the sake of anyone else. And then you get to realize, well, the world is a better place for you if everybody around you is living up to their fullest potential and being their true self. They're not all clones and carbon copies of everybody walking in the same suit, going to the same job, doing the same thing. They're not robots in the matrix, non-player characters. They get to be themselves. And it's so much more rewarding to meet with a person, to hang out with a person, to befriend a person who is living their true self. And if you don't like them, you don't have to be their friend, but you get so much more variety in the kinds of people that you get to meet. So Bitcoiners are really interesting. I remember when I first started going to Bitcoin meetups and you would see these characters there. It was like, it's like going to the Knights of the Round Table rather than to the corporate luncheon. People with long hair, dressed as hippies, with different ideas and different lifestyles, really, again, getting to express themselves and discover who they are themselves. And that's much more interesting than, did you catch the game last night? Which is another one of these great internet memes. That's crazy. Did you catch the game last night? Everyone kind of a clone, watching the same thing, talking about the same thing, saying the same thing.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think a little bit of that is also because once we start saving in Bitcoin and we realize that we are going to have some kind of financial freedom, that now you do have the time to look within, but also to be yourself, like you said?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that is, when that penny drops for you, when that Satoshi drops for you, that you've got the confidence to know that you've got enough capital, that you don't have to sweat your life away, that you don't have to chase the dollar for next week's paycheck, and that you have no idea how you're going to retire or make next year's mortgage payments or whatever. That really changes your perspective on life. And it's a more accurate perspective because it's not necessarily the case that you have to slave away your entire life. Like, it's the reality of the existing financial fiat money system that steals from you, that causes you to have to work because you're being robbed the whole time. But if you're not being robbed, the productivity gains that we've had in civilization, thanks to industrialization and the information age, really make it so that you can produce and save enough wealth to take care of yourself while still being yourself and not giving up all your waking time and hours to slaving away at a job that isn't really who you truly are.
Yeah. Yep. That is such a gift.
Yeah.
Holding your Bitcoin in self-custody is an important step towards self-sovereignty, but writing your seed phrase on paper is risky. Paper can burn, fade, or get lost. MICROSEED helps you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's durable, precise, and easy to transport. Use my link below for 5% off. Now, back to the show. And I want to talk a little bit about your amazing short film. One thing I heard is you say it's an undeclared war is over property, wealth, power, and money, and between families that seek freedom and those who seek easy rewards at others' expense.
Mhm.
So, do you think some people just want easy rewards, or is this a product of the fiat system and them getting used to this easy rewards?
Well, I mean, I think that the fiat system creates creates a bifurcation. It's not a peer-to-peer system. It's a system where you're either a victim or you're a victimizer, for the most part, right? And most people don't want to be victimizers because they have a moral thing in their heart to not take advantage of other people, but they end up being taken advantage of by bankers, politicians, all sorts of scammers, who can be doctors or teachers or other people selling professional services, but more after the money than after delivering the value that they're promising that they would deliver. And that's the challenge that we find ourselves in, in the great financial crisis and the COVID crisis, and both of which are discussed briefly in the movie. And that's the section where that comes up. And it's like, all that peaceful people want to do is live their own lives in peace, right? And that's the battle that I'm referring to, right? Our families, who are the story's protagonists, are just trying to live their lives, but they are confronted with a great financial crisis that will cost them their home, a COVID crisis that means they can't go to work and that their business gets shut down. And Bitcoin exists or has the promise of delivering them from it and giving them a different future, a future in which they don't have to be victims. They don't have to be victimizers. They can work for their money. They can create value. They can preserve that value in the form of Bitcoin and lead to a better future where we don't live in a victimizer civilization, but we live in a peer-to-peer civilization, which was the promise of democracy, which democracy ultimately didn't deliver on.
Yes, absolutely. And even in the movie, you go into the fact that the livestock will be free rather than what we have now, which is caged livestock and healthy soil, which I loved because it just comes back to everything is downstream of money, but many people don't see that far downstream.
Yeah, and I think this is, probably the most criticism I received about this movie. I got again a very split decision on it, although it was overwhelmingly positive. Some people said, "How dare you predict a future where energy is abundant, where food is healthy, where education is tailored to the individual needs of a student?" Like how can you say that Bitcoin will bring about such a thing? And I think it's based in the roots of what we've been discussing so far in this recording, that when people actually aren't out to victimize somebody else, they're not trying to see if they can fill a cow with water so that they can claim that it weighs more than it does, so they can sell it for more pounds than it is because they're selling you water. But they actually take pride in the work that they do, focus on the long term, not on the short term of this getting the cash and spending it before it disappears. It changes your focus. It changes your time horizon, right? I mean, this is why, again, the couple of memes in the Bitcoin space are, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And it's about low time preference. That's about slowing down your sense of urgency and focusing on things that take a long time. And agriculture that takes years to build, but is healthy and alive and rewarding, like I talk about with regenerative agriculture for the soil, for example, is a low time preference initiative. You're not trying to, for the next quarter, squeeze as much poundage out of the land as you can, even if it's low nutrient, low value, unhealthy food that makes us all fat and sick. You're focused on something that you can be proud of and take pride in for the long term. And it's been a long time since we've had that in our civilization. I think in the days of before industry, craftsmanship was a huge aspect. People made beautiful things to last, and they took pride in what they did, in that it was beautiful and built to last. And I think that's a very real part of the human experience, but it's not a part of our present day human experience, right? We just see uglier buildings produced with uglier furniture and uglier art, and that nothing is built to last. We need to pivot away from that, or else we just accelerate into, nothing built to last, nothing built with beauty. But we're fully capable of that, and the quality of our lives is better. But we need a money that is aligned with building to last, right? And Bitcoin is itself built to last. It's going to last forever. The design of the system is indestructible, unstoppable, uninflatable, undebasable. So it's got all of these qualities of something that was built to last. it will last forever, right? It's this rare thing, and the structure that can't be destroyed. And so, if it can't be destroyed and it can't be debased, it can't be damaged. The blockchain is immutable. So the beauty of the structure is that it can't be changed. You can't even be dented, right? Unlike the pyramids, which are 5,000 years old, used to have limestone on them and a gold cap, but it's all worn out. Nothing. The Bitcoin blockchain, the Genesis block, is forever immortalized in exactly the digital representation that it is, and it will never be malleated by one bit. And I mean that both in the binary digit sense and in the qualitative, quantitative sense. It's perfect and immutable for forever.
which is quite amazing.
Yeah.
So your movie is a prediction, and is that a little bit about you looking forward to the world you want to see?
Yeah, I think I wrote it inspired by everything that I was reading at the time. It was in 2022, and it was everything that Bitcoiners were optimistic and hopeful about at the time. Maybe not every single thing, but a whole lot of the main topics. And I think I picked art, education, food and healthcare, energy, and money. And maybe there's one thing that I'm missing right now, but those were the areas that we forecast in and dug in on and talked about how they would change in the future and what that would mean for humanity in the long term. So yeah, the other kind of friction I got on that movie was like, is this a documentary or is it a prediction? And it's like, well,
Mhm.
documents the history and then connects the dots and says where the future might go. So it's a little bit sci-fi, it's a little bit history. There's some people who weren't comfortable with mixing those two genres together in a 15-minute film, but I did it anyways.
What is your overall Bitcoin philosophy?
Bitcoin is perfectly aligned with the live and let live philosophy and the keep what you create. It encourages people to be creative, not to be destructive, and not to be parasitic, right? Like parasites live off of the creation of others, destroy the creation of others, but none of those can exist without creators. And they all exist, these other two exist at the expense of creators. And we all have the innate ability to create. That's one of the most divine things about us. We're created by a creator to be creative. And if you don't believe in God, that's okay too. You can still acknowledge that human beings are creative beings. And so here we are with this creative capacity, and we are incentivized to create kind of from our hearts, but we lose that incentive to create when we see that what we create, we don't receive reward for, or we don't get to keep. Bitcoin changes that, right? Bitcoin allows you to trade your creative efforts for money that is not debased, doesn't lose purchasing power, gains it in fact, and can't be seized by force. So it changes the rules of the game of wealth over years. Even when we had a gold standard, although gold wasn't very much debased, it could certainly be taken by force, and many wars were fought and much blood was spilt over the seizing of gold by force and violence. You can't really do that with Bitcoin. And so we have a new invention that enables us to be our best, to be creative beings universally, to live in peace with one another, to work for each other's productive efforts. But this is the new age that Bitcoin takes us into. It takes us into an age where property rights are very much more protected than they've ever been in history, and that should lead to a surge of creativity. And I just don't just mean artistic creativity. I mean all form, mathematical, scientific, industrial, every form of creativity, maybe even forms that we haven't even realized we're capable of yet. And so it should be a new kind of a renaissance for humanity as Bitcoin replaces the old money.
Yeah. Why do you think more people don't see the problem? And do you think this is just a gradual progression towards Bitcoin as more and more problems come in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see that there is a problem. They can't put their finger on the center of it. And Bitcoin isn't the center of all the problems in the world, but the money is a big problem. But people don't see it because they're not taught about money. Right? Like you're taught about English, you're taught about history, you're taught about geography, you're taught about arithmetic, but you're not taught about how the money works or what money is, or even an economics as a science is filled with cockamamie theories, crackpot theories that don't actually work in practice. And so you're left with, and the same is true of politics, right? So people don't see the problem because they're distracted from it. They end up having to work incredibly hard on some job that they probably don't like doing in the majority of the cases, but need to do. So we're reduced in our potential existence, and it's hard to see the big picture of what new creation has come about, especially when it's as complicated and sophisticated as Bitcoin, that it requires advanced mathematics and computers and all of these things to exist. But it's, we're there now. And Bitcoin is growing incredibly quickly. It's the fastest asset in the history of the world to achieve a valuation of 1 trillion and 2 trillion. And probably it'll be the same for 3 trillion and 4 trillion and so on and so forth. But it's like the awareness and the ability for it to spread and grow and to not be stopped by the forces that resist a peer-to-peer world, or the forces that want to be victimizers of victims. It's able to be resistant to that, but it's not an instant thing. We have to work for it. It takes time. It's a slow build, just like everything that I said about, the things that are built to last take a long time to build. And a civilization built around Bitcoin isn't going to be something that just pops up into existence overnight. It'll be something that takes a generation or two, maybe even 3, to fully manifest itself.
Are you living on a Bitcoin standard as much as you can? And do you also believe in Bitcoin as a medium of exchange?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen all of this. Very few people, I try to have as much of my savings in Bitcoin as possible. I keep some cash on the side so that I can live day to day, meet expenditure requirements. But I'm really all in on Bitcoin as far as both financially and spiritually. Let's put it that way. And and I expect it to carry me, through the rest of my life. Every opportunity I get to spend it with somebody who values it, or to gift it to somebody who will value it as a gift, I take that. I take that opportunity. So I'm trying to live, I'm trying to live in the future by using the tools of the future that have already been delivered to me. And one of them is Bitcoin.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned spiritual because that was my next question. And, Jeff Booth posted something on Noster recently. He said, regardless of if you first came to understand Bitcoin from an energy of a higher consciousness or your time in Bitcoin leads you to a higher consciousness, the result is the same, a gradual higher consciousness for all of society.
Mhm.
That's huge. And that would come from a belief that we're all connected, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is such a big topic, and it's hard to tackle in a single question here. I mean, I think if I try to do a very low level explanation of a higher consciousness, it is the Bitcoin network connects us all, right? When was the last time or ever did you have something that everyone in the world agrees on? On the Bitcoin blockchain, everyone's in full 100% undisputed, perfect agreement on what the state of the Bitcoin blockchain is. And every 10 minutes, we add a new set of changes to it, and everybody is in full, complete agreement with respect. We're in consensus. It is a system of building consensus between human beings, the likes of which has never been done before. And that alone brings us together, right? That alone says, I have this and you have that, and there's no dispute about it. Right? And if I want to give what I have to you, I'm able to, and you're able to receive it. And nobody can stand in the middle between us and prevent us from having that exchange. So it's incredibly liberating, right? But unifying at the same time. It's individuating and unifying simultaneously. And Bitcoin is filled with all of these paradoxes, because all of these things that we thought were dichotomies and trade-offs to one another turn out to actually be, angles in a triangle that support one another and have a mutual benefit to one another. So I think the spiritual component of this, right, and just like the sense of human spirit that it brings forward, can't be overestimated. It's nothing like anything we've seen before, right? And so that, I think, is what Jeff Booth is talking about in some respects. I mean, I think there are many different angles of it, and I could spend all day talking about it. But even just at that basic level, that here is, for the first time in human history, something that everyone in the world agrees on. precisely, completely, up to the minute. Nothing like that has ever existed before, and and that's profoundly unifying. And it doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but it gives us something very meaningful that we can agree on, and that is what we're prepared to exchange. What we have produced and received exchange for, and what we can now exchange for in the future.
Yeah, I really like that angle. For our last question,
Sure.
how has Bitcoin changed you the most?
Oh my God. I mean, it's helped me realize who the true self, who my true self is, right? It's given me the freedom to explore who I am and to live up to who I am, and not have to be a wage earner from 9 to 5, 8 days, 5 days a week, or whatever, 5 days a week, every day for the rest of my life, with 2 weeks off for vacation here and there. It's I became a writer from being a businessman, and I wrote about the things that I was passionate and caring about, and I discovered in that writing what was actually inside of me and who I truly was, and was able to make new friends and new acquaintances, and befriend myself in a way that I had never done so before. So Bitcoin gave me the gift of discovering who I am, and then being able to live the rest of my life as my true self, rather than as something that somebody else wanted me to be.
And there's no bigger gift than that. Wow.
Exactly.
Well, big shout out to all the Canadian Bitcoiners, because there's an amazing group of people up there. And tell us where people can find you, Tomer.
I'm most active on X, and I do a Sunday Spaces Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, called Bitcoin Philosophy Sundays, where we talk about a different philosophical issue each week. It's a 2-hour discussion, but I pop in and out of a lot of other things. If people want to see, I have 3 movies. So Bitcoin is Generational Wealth is one of them. There is a movie version of the legendary treasurer Satoshi Nakamoto, which I recommend people see as well. And there's one called Bitcoin is Beautiful. And if you go to YouTube and search for each of those with my name, you'll find them as the top hit. So people can see that. My book is available for free. You can download it at swan.com/whybitcoin, WHYBITCOIN. You can also find a way to get it print on demand version if you want it. It's a coffee table book. It's got lots of nice pictures in it. And you can also find out where you can get the kids book if you want to read a book for like a 3 to 7-year-old about the wonders that we talked about, Satoshi's invention. You can get that there. So, and I've got a Medium page, tomerstrolight.medium.com, where most of my articles have been published. So there's a lot of places where various of my works are scattered. You can find some articles on Bitcoin Magazine and some on swan.com, where I was the editor-in-chief. So I, of course, wrote a fair bit there. But that's probably enough to keep someone busy for quite a while.
I was going to say, it's some more work for me to do. I really appreciate all you're doing for Bitcoin, and it's amazing information. I'll post links below, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Paula.